All right. Hey there, folks. Since book tour and conventions are still somewhat on hold for a bit, I figured I'd bring book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster Season 5, Intriguing Interviews with Creative Minds. From Philip Marlowe to Spencer to Veronica Mars and even Miller from the great sci-fi show The Expanse, most of us here tonight are fans of a great private eye story, regardless of the genre. The very nature of their work is often mysterious and alluring to us, but how much of what we read and what we watch on TV shows and movies accurately reflects what private detectives actually do in real life, and how much is pure fantasy for dramatic purposes? That's what we'll be discussing tonight as we dive into Private Detectives, Truth, Lies, and Secrets in Modern Fiction. On our panel tonight is Matthew Spaier, the owner of Satellite Investigations, Inc., the top-rated plaintiff-only investigation firm in New York City. Matt has been published in the collaborative college textbook, The Art of Investigations, has appeared as a guest columnist for Psychology Today, and writes 2 columns every issue for PI Magazine, which I read every month. He is also the host of PI Perspectives podcast, where he interviews investigative professionals about their skill sets. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right. Also on our panel is Kelly, who owns and operates Old Line Investigative Services in Baltimore. In addition to offering a full range of PI services, Caitlin recently joined the Baltimore County Public School Homeland Security Community College of Baltimore County Criminal Justice Studies Advisory Board. Try saying that even one time fast. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you. Honored to be here as a part of this panel.
All right. And rounding out our panel is Scott Fulmer, a 30-year veteran private investigator and the managing director of Missouri Private Eye, the top-rated investigation firm throughout Missouri. Scott is also the author of the true crime memoir, Confessions of a Private Eye, and hosts Private Eye Confidential. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Russ. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, for those of you tuning in, feel free to send me or the panelists questions or comments in the chat box throughout the hour, and we'll get to some at the end. All right, I've got more questions than we can ever get to in an hour, but let's crack this case. Sorry, I couldn't resist a little private eye humor. All right, so I'm going to start with the basics, right? So there are countless ways to make your way in the world. What in God's creation led you to being a private investigator? Scott.
Well, it was something I've always, that's always interested me. You know, I read Sherlock Holmes when I was in elementary school, and I pretty much was hooked at that point. And I had an uncle who was a Texas private investigator. And so when I was in high school, he brought me on, you know, a couple of surveillances with him, and it was fantastic. You know, I really ate it up. And so ever since that point, it's been something that I wanted to do and something that I pursued.
All right, Caitlin.
Similar, like so often we have family that's been somewhat in the field, and it kind of leads us down that road. And so my father was in law enforcement and was a Maryland fire marshal for a long time. And so through that, I watched him, you know, investigate fires all the time. And that's how I guess I gained my interest in investigative work. So I did wind up starting out in law enforcement, which kind of led me down this path of investigative work.
All right, Matt, what about you?
I kind of fell into it. I went to school for criminal justice, and it was the mid 90s when I graduated, and everywhere just went on a hiring freeze. I was supposed to go work for the Department of Investigations in New York City, which is kind of like the internal affairs for everything but NYPD. And when the city went on a hiring freeze, I kind of freaked out and took the first job I could get. I ended up kicking around, and by I guess by 2001, I started working for an attorney, and I had an offer to go to law school from him. You know, go to law school, I'll pay you like you're an employee, and you come work for me afterwards. And it was a sweetheart deal. I was going to do it, and had a freak out moment and decided I wanted to be a private investigator because I enjoyed doing the investigative work on the lawyer cases, just trying to figure out why things happened and how they happened. And I wrote a business plan and convinced a bank to give me money, and the rest is history.
All right. Okay. All right. So when most of us think of private eyes, private detectives, we're drawn to the movies with murder and shady crimes. But day to day, and Matthew, I'll stick with you, just day to day, what kind of cases do you most often work on?
Yeah, it's nothing like you see on TV. Even before we jumped on, Scott was mentioning about Law and Order, and every time like I watch Law and Order, I giggle a little bit because this is totally not the case. So like a typical day for me, I specialize in personal injury cases. So we're dealing with accidents, and I have my guys out investigating how an accident happened, looking for videos, taking statements from people, and really just trying to figure out and put the pieces together to gain leverage for our clients who are law firms, but they're representing people that have been injured. So it's really nothing like you see on TV. It's interesting to talk about at cocktail parties. When you say what you do, everyone's like, "Ooh, tell me more." And you've been doing this long enough. You have interesting stories in the genre of the type of work you do, but it really isn't what they think it is. It just sounds really cool.
See, there you go. Breaking the mystery already. All right, Caitlin, what about you? Do you have like a core group of kinds of cases that you take?
Well, I guess you could call me a general practitioner. I do various, like a lot of different cases, and often when people think of private investigators, the first thing they say is, so do you like catch cheaters? And while yes, that is a small portion of what I do, and some investigators might focus in on that, that is not the majority of what I do. And cases that I take on generally, I mean, it is a good bit of surveillance that can range from, like Matt was saying, the personal injury type cases, to, it could be any type of surveillance for any, even civil investigative or civil cases, litigation that's going on. It could be, trying to locate somebody with the skip tracing. It could be, no surveillance involved. It could be online research, backgrounds, and like missing person cases. I mean, it's a wide range of investigations that we can do, but it is not like the movies.
So when you say, just for everyone who's watching, so when you say skip tracing, just tell us what that means.
It's basically trying to track somebody down to where they're actually at. Somebody, whether they're intentionally trying to not be found, or the client just doesn't know where they are. We're trying to locate them for a purpose, typically for court.
Okay. And what about Scott? Is there a core bucket of cases, kind of cases you work on, or you are a generalist as well?
No, I do have, well, first I would echo, what Matt and Caitlin said about it, as opposed to TV and film and books. There are some similarities that you'll find, but a lot of it is totally different from what we see in literature and film. But I primarily deal with, I do a lot of surveillance. So I do a lot of insurance defense, workers' comp fraud, trying to catch individuals that Matthew is on the dark side. I'm on the right side. I do the I do the insurance defense, folks who are out there faking injuries or more than likely exaggerating a claim to get money. I follow them, see what their real activities are. And like Caitlin, I also do domestic cases. So yes, I do cheating spouses. Although a lot of that really comes down to children. It really comes down to the child custody cases and visitation, that type of thing. And then I do some corporate investigations for small businesses, things like that.
So you guys have mentioned, it's one of the questions I had on here. You mentioned surveillance. So as a trade craft, surveillance seems like a pretty common technique. So talk to me about the day in the life of surveillance. I've read that 4-hour shifts are about the max that you should take on. Is that right? Is that nonsense? What do you think, Scott? Just why don't we keep going?
I wish. No, typically it's 8 to 10 hours. A typical surveillance shift will last for 8 to 10 hours. I get up at the very earliest. I may get up at 3:30, 4 a.m. More than likely it's around 4:30 or 5 a.m. And then you have to get there before and get set up before your subject wakes up, obviously. And so then the surveillance can last till 2 in the afternoon. It can last to 4. I think the longest one I ever had was 18 hours. And this individual actually left and went across to they left Idaho and ended up in Portland, Oregon, and stayed for the weekend. So, but that's kind of a rare thing. So typically it's 8 to 10 hours. And yeah, go ahead.
So when you say get set up, so I mean, just remember, all of us at home, we don't do what you do. So we have these fantastical ideas about what it's really like. So you get up, you get in your car, you go where you're going to go. Walk us through what is it like for you to act? What do you mean by setting up? What does that mean?
So it's basically surveillance talk. You're basically setting up and getting in position at the surveillance. So you have all your equipment with you in your vehicle. You park in an area, near the home, not right in front of it like they do on TV. But typically you're 2 or 3 houses, 3 or 4 houses down from the residence, if that's where it's going to be a residence. And you have a windshield shade across your front window. I have surveillance curtains that hang down. I have tinted windows. And so I can sit there in my vehicle and not be seen. And then I can have my video camera ready, and I can, see the subject when they come out, whether they're checking the mail or mowing the lawn, or if they leave. And at that point, what was once a static surveillance becomes a mobile surveillance, and then we'll follow them to wherever their destination is, so we can gather more video on them.
So Caitlin, what about you? You had also specifically mentioned surveillance. What else can you add to this that Scott hasn't already touched on?
As far as surveillance?
Yes.
Well, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. I can give you an example.
Please.
There's pre-surveillance too that we do a lot of times or if new information comes up, new addresses come up that we've learned through running database searches, we may want to check that out in advance of really doing some surveillance. And things can happen. So an example would be in the Baltimore area where I'm at, the neighborhoods are kind of crazy. They can change quick. And I went to go check out this address, and this actually was a suspected cheating case. And we were trying to figure out where the girlfriend of this husband, where the paramour, I should say, lived. And so I had figured out this additional address, and I went out there, and I thought, I just want to maybe see if his vehicle's there, see what kind of neighborhood it is. I get out there, and not only is his vehicle there, but he's standing outside talking to a bunch of guys. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm doing surveillance now. And I throw up my sunshades, and my windows are all blacked out, and I jump in the back of my van and start surveillance. I've got to turn the vehicle completely off so it doesn't seem like anybody's in there. And I just try to be invisible.
So you have a van and not a car.
Yes. Now, some people, don't necessarily want a van because you can kind of almost stand out more. But I mean, mine looks like a soccer mom van. It's not necessarily a surveillance looking van, except it does have the blacked out windows. And that is what allows me to do surveillance in a way that nobody knows I'm in the vehicle. Now, I may not use that in every scenario. I may use my husband's car, if I don't want that look. But in that scenario in particular, crazy things happen in a surveillance set. It went from focusing on one person to people in that neighborhood it's a high drug area, kind of wanting to know what this new vehicle is doing on this street that they haven't seen before. And now neighborhood people are focused on me. And so I would say there can be a danger element in certain scenarios like that, but the majority of the time it is not.
Okay, so it's sticking on this surveillance, and maybe Matt, you can jump in if you
Sure.
Right. So if you're going to be doing a surveillance for 4, 6, 8, 10 hours, how do you stay focused that whole time? So that's just part of it. And I'll go through a couple of things I wanted to ask, and you can dive in. So how do you stay focused? And is there ever a moment, I mean, I don't care who you are, how good you are. You can't tell me that from time to time, you're not going to get tired, drift off. Have you ever, you're surveying someone, you close your eyes for a second, you turn your head to grab something. Has anyone ever slipped away from you in the exact moment that you looked away? Does that happen? Or is that just like a crazy, is that just more fantastical?
It can happen. It can totally happen. I had a situation very early on, before I even started my business at a company I'd worked for right out of college, where we had an overnight at a lumber yard. So this is a lumber yard in Manhattan where employees were coming in the middle of the night and taking inventory. So we had it set up, but it was one of the seedy parts of New York City. And I would say that in my awesome Scott Fulmer voice. I can't sell it as well as he can, but there were prostitutes all over the place. So yeah, you could get very easily distracted, and they want to knock on your door and see what you're doing too. And why are you here? Are you police? So there's a challenge there. I can recall another one I did later on many years ago, and using my own business, where I was working for a celebrity who was filming a movie, and they had a problem with the stalker. And I had to get a picture of the stalker to hand out to the folks on the set to make sure if she showed up, they'd know who she was. So I think it was about 4 or 5 hours camped out across the street in a condo association, like in the trees under leaves and things like that. And it's difficult, man. You really have to focus. And you're sitting in your car, you can be a distraction too. I mean, if you're listening to Russ's great podcast or webcast here, it can be a little distracting at times too. But you have a job at hand, if you're a professional, you really leave yourself open to be ready for anything. One of the other things that I want to mention is doing surveillance in the metro is different than doing somewhere out in the sticks. So in Manhattan, for instance, anything can happen. It could be a car, it could be a subway. Your subject could go down into the tubes, into the subway. And if you're in a car, what are you going to do? So usually when we set up those types of work, you have two people, right? So somebody who can jump out on foot if they need to. I always tell when I get calls for this, I said, there's the cheap way and the right way. How do you want to do it? If you want to do it the right way, you need multiple people. But if you're going on the cheap, you get what you pay for, and that is probably one of the biggest challenges with surveillance, in my opinion, is selling the idea to your client that they need to invest the right amount of capital in doing what needs to be done. And Caitlin touched on something a little bit earlier that's really important too, is that pre-surveillance. And if you're not doing pre-surveillance on your surveillance job, you're setting yourself up for failure. And that just means showing up that you're ready for anything because you've done your homework. So yeah, that's really important.
All right. So a little bit of recon. So, so I'm assuming, right. And I've done, some of my homework on this is, so I'm assuming you're talking about, maybe you scan the area, you kind of know where the access roads are. You can understand, if I need to, if I make a left, I'm up this road. If I make a right, I'm up that road. I understand the layouts of the.
Well, not only that, if you have, let's say it's a matrimonial and, you've got a wife who suspects her husband is cheating, where does he get his coffee in the morning? Is he a Dunkin' Donuts guy or a Starbucks guy? And that's a Jim Nano's trick, by the way. Jim's PI magazine, he's a surveillance guy, right? So, if you get lost, if you lose the guy where you're driving, he's probably going to the local Dunkin' Donuts if he's a Dunkin' Donuts guy. So you do your pre-work and say, okay, the Dunkin' Donuts is over here. If I lost this person, let me just do a drive-by over the Dunkin' Donuts. Maybe he's on the line waiting for coffee. So stuff like that is important.
So go ahead, please.
I was going to say there's a lot of what he's describing is some of the nuances of the job. And as I always say, we can hire a baboon to do surveillance, but they're not going to be down with the particular nuances that you need to know to be successful. And in terms of how what it's like, I listen to podcasts. That's how I kind of keep mentally alert, if you will, especially PI perspectives. But
text in the mail, buddy.
But the other thing I was going to say is that although it's typically not physically difficult to sit there for 10 hours and watch someone's front door. It's emotionally and mentally taxing. And so at the end of a surveillance, I'm just kind of worn out, not physically, but I've concentrated so much of my time and effort on paying attention and watching an individual that when I get home, I just want to chill out and relax. It's just so it is difficult in that respect. And if I can add one other thing, in terms of how it's different than what you see on TV. Obviously on television, they're on the Rockford Files. Jim Rockford is following the guy right behind him. We don't do that unless it's downtown rush hour and you have no choice, but typically we don't do that. But you never see anybody peeing into a bottle, pardon my French, and you never see anybody sweat. It gets very cold or it gets very hot. I have a portable air conditioner. I have fans I use. And so I've been in Wyoming with my whole car is shaking from the wind and I'm freezing cold. So those are things that you never really see on in film or TV that are what we deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah, I always wonder about that. I mean, at some point you gotta go. Like, so we gotta go. I mean, so there you go. All right. So I want to ask you, is there such a thing as like a standard PI kit? I mean, so you leave your house, you've got your phone, you got your keys, you got your wallet, but do you have a set of gear and equipment? Do you have cameras, recorders, secret pens? Like what's your normal like go bag when you're heading out into doing field work?
Matt, you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess I can go for on that one. I mean, so full disclosure, I'm not typically doing surveillance work. I do very minor, minimal surveillance work. I usually farm it out to people.
And this can be not even just beyond surveillance. Okay, I'm talking about the life of a PI.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, you got to have a tablet or a phone, right? And obviously, that would be the most important thing. Being able to you have access to the internet is important. Also having measurement tools, right? So having like a walking ruler, the rolling ruler, so you can get measurements, proper measurements. There are also different types of rulers, some that are at angles where you can tell if how deep a hole is if you're trying to measure the hole, or a level if you're trying to measure stairs. So having the right measurement equipment, and having the knowledge to understand if you're taking pictures of a broken sidewalk or a crappy set of stairs, what an engineer would need later on. If an engineer was looking at those photos, they could tell if there were any violations just by the work that you did, right? So if the railing wasn't high enough, or the tread of the stairs didn't come out, or the rise wasn't high enough, and knowing what those laws are. So just understanding that. So having the right measurement tools would be something. A camera. Don't take photos with your cell phone if you don't have to. Using a digital SLR camera is the way to go. I prefer Nikon, but some people use Canon equipment also. So, you would have your video camera and you would have your regular camera. On the defect cases, it's important to take video because you want to be able to show in real time. It's easier for a juror to look at that, right? So you're always, having in your mind that a jury or whoever is going to be looking at this to really understand. I had a case where there was a defect on the side. It was like a piece of stone that would move, right? And just because we put our foot down on it and was stamping on it, showing up and down, they were arguing that, oh, it doesn't move, and then us showing the video that it moved, like they settled the case like right away from there. So those are some things I think you are important to have. Obviously a mapping system, right? GPS, so you don't get lost. Where you're going.
Okay, let me just jump in. So Caitlin, anything else?
Yeah, I would piggyback on that. More specific to surveillance would be, my preference is to use multiple cameras for various reasons. Always a dash cam for any time I'm in motion, or just a secondary camera in general. I actually like using my cell phone when I'm not necessarily in my vehicle and I'm out and about. Because that just is the way to look the most normal. Everybody's looking at their phones all the time. It's kind of expected. So I actually use this date and time stamp app that I can record video with, and it just, I make out like I'm looking at my phone. That's what I do when I'm typically on foot, because I can't hold a actual camera up. But of course, a good digital camera is always necessary as well, to have sunshades, as I mentioned earlier, to throw up so I can be completely invisible in the vehicle. And those are the big things. Different clothes. I always have like hats, scarves, different shirt, a jacket, different clothes so I can change. I've been known to even keep a wig in the vehicle occasionally because I need to change my hair color up. You never know.
So that's actually a good one, because that's actually one of my questions is so we'll go since you got there. So when you question, so it's a two-part question. One, when you question someone, do you have to identify yourself as a private detective, or can you employ fake names, fake jobs, or even disguises, or is that just the movies, or like maybe it sounds like it's not?
Well, I mean, if I'm questioning somebody, generally with the type of work I'm doing, it's usually not in a surveillance situation. It's in a witness interview type situation. And yeah, I'm always very upfront as to exactly who I am. I mean, I guess there could be scenarios where it doesn't matter, and I may bend the story a little bit, but for the most part, with the type of work I do, I'm very upfront. And with surveillance, the majority of the cases I work, I never want anybody to notice me. So no, I'm not talking to them, but maybe you guys have different experiences with that.
Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what she said, and it really depends. And if you're taking a statement or if you're interviewing someone, then obviously you're going to tell them you're a private investigator. You're going to show them your credentials and tell them why you want to talk to them. But there are what we call a pretext, which is a fib, for lack of a better word, where we may misrepresent ourselves to get information. Now, we're not going to do something that's illegal. We're not going to say that we're the police or that we're clergy, or that something to that effect. But we may say that we're taking a survey. We're with XYZ company or something to that effect. We're calling for a job reference, just to see if we can find out if the individual's home, find out if they actually live there. So yeah, we will do stuff like that. As far as wigs, no, I've never worn a wig, but I do have hats. I do change shirts and things like that. I actually have a go bag with me. And as Matt said, if you may be driving down the street and your subject may get out and go into the subway. We don't have subways here, but they may get on a bus, or they may get out and walk. They may come to a park. They may go anywhere. You never know where they're going to go. And so my go bag is basically a backpack that I can put on, and I have cameras. I have a recorder. I have pins that are video recorders, that are audio recorders.
How reliable are they?
What's that?
How reliable are they, the recording?
That's a really good question. Anybody in the business will tell you they work when most of the time, except when you really need them to work.
Yeah.
If they're even recording.
Right. Yeah, because for example, when I go inside and I'll follow somebody into a restaurant or into a store, and I may walk around and follow some guy in Home Depot, and I have a key fob video camera. It looks like a little key fob that you would use to, like this for your vehicle, but it is a 1080p digital video camera, and but there's no lens. I can't look at it and know where the person is. You have to practice with it, and so when you first start using it, if you're not good, you're going to see lots of video of the roof or lots of video of the floor until you kind of get to an idea of where the subject should be in relation to where you are and how you hold it. So yeah.
So there is actually technology Lawmate has a great key fob that there's an app on your phone where you can actually bring the screen up. So I've used that in restaurants and in situations that Scott had talked about, where you've got your key fob, you've got whatever, or pen, whatever it is, and it's transmitting to your phone. And you can actually see the image on your phone and make sure you're doing it right. You know, back in the day, same thing, like you would have these button cameras or the eyeglass cameras or the hat cameras. And, you know, you could never tell if it was askew or whatever until you went back and downloaded everything and going, oh, I totally caught this person, but the camera wasn't working or you know, wasn't at the right angle or things like that. So yeah, it was frustrating back in the day. But as technology gets better, you know, we're able to do things like that, which are potential game changers. And cameras have gotten smaller. And I remember I had a situation where I went into a nightclub and I was trying to get a light meter reading because it was uneven stairs or in a step down area and the lighting was bad and this person, you know, had been injured. So I had to get a light meter reading, and I had it like snaked up my pants to go down to my foot and had it hooked up to my shoe. And I had arrived at that club at like 9:45, not even knowing that was the best thing that could have happened, because at 10 o'clock security showed up and they started patting down people. So if I was getting pat down to go into this place, I would have had some explaining to do as to what was in my pants and what I was doing. So yeah, it was just, you know, luck at that particular time.
So I want to ask you guys, since we're speaking on this thread of, you know, technology and gadgets and whatnot, and I happened to see, Scott, I literally just read like the first page or two of your book. So in some ways, it seems like being a private investigator is like being a spy. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I would say it's we're basically private spies for hire. And I would say that technology is wonderful, and I know a lot of people get really worked up on how wonderful technology is, and that it's really helped our industry, and it has. But I will say the main things that we use are really the telephone and the computer. I would say those are the two biggest ones that we will use, other than maybe a video camera. But there are, you know, we do have all these cameras and recorders and scanners and all kinds of things that we use as well. But it is very much like being a spy. You have to kind of look the part. I kind of look like every man. You kind of have to blend in and not be, you know, you can't draw attention to yourself, in other words, which is how, you know, I guess a spy would be.
Right. And so the spy mantra is like to be like the gray man, right? To be invisible.
The everyman, yeah.
Right.
And I should point out, in some cases, we use GPS trackers, and if it's appropriate and legal. And so that can be one of the biggest tools if it's an appropriate situation for a tracker where we can get it on a vehicle, and, you know, it reduces the risk of losing somebody, obviously, because we can just go right to where they're at. Don't necessarily need two investigators in that scenario. So that can be an incredibly helpful tool.
So yeah, that also cuts the cost for the client, because hiring a private investigator is expensive. If we knew when someone was going to be active, we would just go at that time, but we don't know. And so you may have to conduct 16 hours of surveillance over a few days to figure out what's going on. Whereas, as Caitlin says, with a GPS tracker, if it's legal in your area and you have permissible purpose, you put it on, and then you can sit back in your underwear and drink a Diet Dr. Pepper and look at the app on your phone and see where the person's going, how long they're there, when they're leaving, that type of thing.
Yeah, and it's illegal in New York, so I can't use any of that stuff. The GPS stuff is a no-go.
So
missing out.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that. You're talking about legal versus illegal. So can you, and again, this is all, we're going by, you know, what we see in fiction. So, and we understand that a lot of it's probably nonsense, but can you pick locks, break into places, or are you bound by the same rules and regulations as, you know, as police officers?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. So we have to be really careful, right? So you think about it. Do you have to testify about what you're doing, right? You always got to figure that at some point this case may go to trial and you may be deposed and you're going to have to talk about it. Now think about how it would look if your adversarial attorney says, okay, how did you gather this information? Well, you know, I went onto the construction site and I did what I needed to do or whatever. Okay, did you have permission to be there? No, I didn't have permission to be there. Oh, so you were trespassing, right? So it's like you broke a law to get what you got, right? So right there, it's showing your credibility as being less than spectacular, right? So you're creating a problem for yourself. You may not necessarily be breaking a law, but you're the image of what you're trying to portray, because you want to say like, hey, what I'm testifying about, I'm being truthful. You know, what I found, I'm being truthful about. So if you're not truthful, or if you were deceptive in your means of gathering and gaining information, it could be a problem for you. So, and I'll take it one step further, talking about social media, right? So Scott was talking a little bit about pretexting before, you know, just understanding that if you're hired by an attorney, you are an extension of that attorney, and you are bound by the same laws and rules that they're bound by, right? So if they're not allowed to talk to witnesses on social media, friend request them and be a part of them, you're not allowed to do that, right? As an agent for them, right? Now you can go and say, I'm mad, I'm an investigator, I'm investigating this matter, I'd like to talk to you about it. Well, that's fine, that's good. But if you're, you know, put up a picture of, you know, Dr. Pepper's person of the year, Scott Fulmer, hey, you want to talk to me? You know, like if you're pretending to be somebody you're not, that could potentially be a problem for you. So that's a difference, something you see on Law and Order and you see on these shows where they're going places, they're breaking into places and doing things. And it's like, no, it's going to get thrown out. Like it's never going to stand up in court. You need to understand that, right? So
don't
break the rules.
Yeah. So Scott, Caitlin, same thing, or is there a gray area there?
Well, I'll tell you, I think there's some gray areas, but first of all, we don't even have police powers. So that needs to be clear. We are not police officers, and we can't even do the same things they do. We obviously can't make arrests. You know, it would be illegal to break into anywhere. But there are gray areas, especially depending on the state you're in. And one thing that a lot of private investigators do, including myself, that we haven't even mentioned is process serving, where we're serving people with court papers. And so a lot of people, you know, try to evade service and we'll put up these no trespassing signs. And some private investigators, when they see that, they're like, oh, heck no, I'm not going anywhere near that property. Well, it really isn't a sufficient reason to not be served court papers. People have to, or process servers have to attempt to serve somebody, and it could be through walking up and knocking on their door, or if you can't access their door, it could be through following them somewhere and serving them after they leave their house, maybe at work or wherever. But here is a scenario where it was a very gray area, and it, you know, and this person I was trying to serve, the client had been trying to get them for over a year, had multiple servers, totally could not get these people served because they live in this huge house that has a brick wall surrounding it, the entire property. And there is no way to get up to the door. So it's not even like, you know, I mean, they have no trespassing signs, but you know, you can't even access the door to try to knock on the door. So there was a portion of the wall that was short enough that I could climb over it. So I was a little concerned about getting back out of there because it was a little steeper on the other side, and I'm 5'3", so that was a little bit of an issue. And I had my intern at the time with me, and there was two different gates on two different streets where the residents could have left out, and we stood there for about 4 hours. And after no sign of anybody surfacing, you know, we had to make a decision, and we knew people were likely in there based on the amount of vehicles there. So I was concerned about the trespassing thing, and is it okay for me to just climb over this wall and go up and knock on the door? But I thought, how are we ever going to get them served? Nothing's ever good enough for the court to get alternative service because nothing is really able to be done. You know, we can't they don't want to invest all this money in following them.
Okay,
Well,
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're getting short on time and we got a lot more to cover. So a quick interlude for the folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for the panel, send them in the chat box and we'll get to them in a few minutes. Okay, one question I wanted to ask. I'm speculating here, but I would assume that at least from time to time, you might find yourself in a position of legitimate physical danger. Is that true? And if so, are you trained to defend yourselves, or do you carry, do you carry a firearm with you or other weapons to protect yourself? Scott?
Well, I guess the answer is it depends. Every private investigator is different. They all come from different backgrounds, and all the licensing is required in all U.S. states except for about, I think, 4 or 5 states no longer require a private investigator license. So if you watch CSI and wake up one day and want to be a PI in Wyoming, you can do it. But in terms of training, personally, I mean, I was in the military. I'm a Gulf War veteran. I have not gotten into a fight. I had a Hell's Angel guy chase me, but he didn't have his motorcycle, so I just got in my car and drove away. So it was pretty simple. But if you're doing the job right, nobody knows you're there. And so you pretty much can stay out of trouble that way.
Okay, Caitlin or Matt?
I'll jump in on this. So I do not have firearms. We don't have firearms with any of my employees. The insurances that go along with carrying a firearm, very expensive, not worth it. We don't have the need for it. I'm not a bodyguard company. However, we have been in some certain situations. I can think in my mind in the past, 15 or 16 years, maybe 3 or 4 incidents where we were at wrong place at wrong time and there was shootout. So now here's one of my employees that's caught in the crossfire. Thankfully was not injured, but definitely shaken up. I remember I was training somebody. It was probably the 2nd or 3rd day that guy was with me, and we were in the Bronx, and all of a sudden there's this high-speed chase where somebody is being chased by the police and literally jumps out of the car as the driver jumps out of the car, and the car keeps going towards a bunch of people that are waiting for a bus. Thankfully, nobody was hit or anything like that.
Oh,
but, they helicopters, the whole big thing. And I go to the guy next to me. I'm training. I'm like, "Welcome to the Bronx. Do you still want the job?" It was crazy. But you do have your confrontations with people, and I can say that if you treat them with respect, if you go into a situation where you're respectful to the people, they're going to honor that respect, and you're not going to run yourself into trouble. I've been in the worst neighborhoods late at night, talking to people the right way, where I did not feel fear for my safety. And I had another guy that I was training that worked for me that was retired law enforcement, and he lasted 1 day because we got up to a building we were going into, and he started yelling at the people. They asked, "Why are you guys here?" And he's like, "What's it to you? Get out of here, blah, blah, blah." Like he was being really disrespectful and cursing people out. I was like, "You're fired, dude. Go home, because you're going to get yourself killed and start problems." So it's all on how you carry yourself.
Caitlin, I have a question. So as an investigator, is your job easier, harder, or more dangerous being a woman, or is it no different than in any other profession?
I would say it's easier. Definitely. I mean, I think females are less threatening. It's just, we blend in better. Overall, I would say, I think we have an advantage as it comes to that.
Okay.
I think most private investigators would agree that there is an advantage to being a woman.
All right. So, okay, one last question. So this is for each of you to go. So of all the fictional private detectives you've ever watched or read about, do any of them, which ones, if any, strike you as being the most realistic? even if it's fringy.
I'll take this. I think it's Jim Rockford. The guy was always broke. He had stuff in the pawn shop. He had clients that didn't pay him. He was living in a seedy trailer there on the side. I mean, not that I don't live in a trailer in Malibu by the beach, but there were certainly some aspects of his life on the show that were accurate in the industry, and those were just a few of them.
Okay, Caitlin.
I can't relate to any of the fictional stories. I just can't. Maybe I just haven't seen enough of them to really have that much perspective. But no, I mean, the ones I've seen, it's just annoying. Overall, it's not the same.
Okay, Matt.
So there are two that come to mind. One is kind of an older version, which is Chinatown, right? So Jack Nicholson's character, I mean, the dude gets his face cut up in like the first 20 minutes of the film. He's got a big scar the whole rest of the movie, and he was constantly like getting beat up and just wrong place at the wrong time. So I thought that was pretty cool. And the most recent version of Perry Mason on HBO, I thought they did a really, really good job of showing how hard it is to be a PI. And this was in the 50s, right? So there's no computers or anything like that. But I thought they did a really, really good job. I really enjoyed that show. I thought it was a good portrayal of what an investigator
Made
does.
a note of that. I'm gonna have to check that out.
All right, that's great. But now it's a time for a special segment where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 possible categories, which I created especially for this event. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories are known unknowns, friend or foe, theme song, super sleuth, hard pass, crime doesn't pay, and put me in coach. All right, Scott, you're up first. You ready?
Go ahead.
All right. And you got put me in coach. All right, so what is this one? This is, if you had the chance to be a part of any investigation throughout world history, what would it be?
Wow, that's a pretty good one. I would say probably the disappearance of Patty Hearst. That's something that went on for a long time and involved domestic terrorism and William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper industry, and it's very interesting.
All right, cool. All right, Caitlin, you're up next. You ready?
Sure.
All right, what do we got for you? We got for you hard pass. Okay, so is there any kind of case as a private investigator that you absolutely refuse to take?
Oh, yes, sure. There are cases where the person trying to hire you is the stalker, or is expecting, things that are inappropriate or illegal. And yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
Okay, all right, Matt, you ready?
Do it.
Let's do it. All right, and you got, all right, known unknowns. So tell me, beyond what we've already discussed, tell me something about being a private investigator that you think the general public isn't aware of.
Something that the general public is not aware of. I would say the effort and time it takes for research. You think everything is at your fingertips, but sometimes it takes soft skills, social engineering. I don't think people realize how much social engineering is really needed to do the job properly. Creating relationships. It's not just tapping on buttons and doing research.
Okay, all right, fair enough. All right, so now we're going to go to our advice column. So I changed this one up a bit for this panel. If you were to offer any, because a lot of folks who are watching here are writers or they want to be. If you were to offer any piece of advice to authors who are going to write about private investigators in one form or another, regardless of the genre, what's one detail or aspect of the job you think is most important that we get right? Caitlin.
You can leave out the glamour. It's not glamorous, as Matt touched on earlier and Scott touched on. You can get hot. You cannot use the restroom many times when you are in your vehicle for 8 to 10 hours straight. So if you want to be realistic and in a storytelling, it's not glamorous. It's very boring a lot of the time, actually.
Matt?
Learn how to embellish. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, things are not as sexy as you think they are, but there are things that happen. I mean, there's a lot of different unknowns that could be interesting, but I would say you probably would want to tag along for a bit if you could. Just really understand the day to day.
Okay, I may take you up on that, by the way. Scott, what about you?
For me, I would say learn how to build rapport. If you can build rapport with just about anybody, then you're going to get the information that you're looking for.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so now we're going to take some questions from the folks at home. Let's see. We already did this one question. Well, we did this one too. Okay, so here's one. Was there ever a time that you stumbled onto a crime or misbehavior completely different than what you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that one. I stumbled onto another investigator who was working for a law firm that I was also working for, who was embezzling from them. So, yeah, the other guy that was like working with me was stealing from them. That was a very interesting and uncomfortable conversation to have with the managing partner of the law firm.
All right, so here's another one. Would you hesitate to take a case if your gut tells you that the potential client is guilty of a crime and they ask you to kind of get into it, to get info on the victims?
I would say it depends. Obviously, even guilty people have attorneys and have investigators that work for them, but the gut is used a lot in this business. And if I had an issue with, if it was them trying to get, the goods on victims or something to that regard, yeah, I probably would pass on the case.
So as a follow-up on sort of your gut, so this is a question for everyone. So as PI, so we talked about being reliant, using modern technology. Do you ever find yourself just using any old school PI techniques that are low tech?
Yeah, I'll jump on that real quick. So the phone, that is the most low tech thing that's out there. Scott talked on it a little bit. That social engineering, really learning how to use kids' gloves and talk to people and develop information. It's a really strong skill to have. If you know how to talk to people and ask the right questions, you'll go very far. And that's something that's, telephone's definitely low tech.
I can tell you another low tech item I've used, and I think this was actually from Chinatown, which is a great film. Mm-hmm. If you've got someone that's gonna be at somebody's house and you want to know how long they're going to be there, you can put a cheap wristwatch underneath the tire, and then they'll crush it on their way out. It may be 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning or whatever.
Oh,
come cool. Back the next day and look at the watch and see when they left. So.
Oh, okay. I'm going to use that one.
Great idea.
Let's see. Okay, I got another one. Wait, here it is. Okay, so going back to the countless hours that you might spend doing surveillance, how much do you have to physically move around when you're sitting in a car to prevent cramping, clots, backaches? Like what's the practical side of this?
Well, I'll tell you, that is why I have a van. So I can flatten those seats out and sit in the back and stretch out, and get comfortable.
Okay. The older you get, the more you need to stretch out. And I'll be 58 this month, and so yeah, it's I can't sit there like I did when I was 24.
All right. So one question I wanted to ask when you get a chance to hit before. So the pandemic obviously turned the world upside down. What was it like? What's it been like during the last 20 months as an investigator? I have to imagine that there's a lot of stuff you just couldn't do.
I'll jump on this one. So in New York, I am the first vice president of my state association. And the first thing that we did when everything started going down is we contacted the governor's office, and our lobbyists really fought for us to be deemed essential services. So we were able to get that designation and we were able to work, but the work did change, right? So we had to pivot. Our clients weren't working, so we weren't getting work. But you found ways to do things, and people wearing masks and surveillance makes that very difficult these days, doing that type of work. But I think the people that have been successful have learned how to pivot the type of work that they're doing and really make it happen. I know there was one investigator I talked to who was actually going to attorneys' offices, picking up their files and delivering their files to the attorneys' homes. Because they were afraid to go and pick up their files, and they made money out of doing it. And there was another one who became a mobile notary. So there were things to do. I got to say though, this past year, like my business has completely bounced back. We've done the most business ever, actually. So that's encouraging.
Well, God bless. I'm glad to hear that. Scott or Caitlin, anything that the
pandemic? Yeah, I would say that initially there was no work for a while. I mean, I didn't have anything going on for a few weeks, and that was when it first started, March of that year, and we were just trying to decide. I mean, everyone was trying to decide, what are we going to do? And so a lot of interviews or statements that we would have normally taken in person and would never have been over the phone became over the phone, became recorded statements over the phone. But eventually, and then people began to work out of their homes, attorneys worked out of their homes, the adjusters worked out of their homes. And so eventually it got to the point where we kind of got back on it. But it was difficult, especially in the beginning, because if you're going to do surveillance and no one's leaving their home and they're not going anywhere, that makes it particularly difficult.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen for a minute and show you guys can show the folks some stuff that you have to offer. So bear with me just a minute, and I'm going to do this right now. Okay, all right. So can we seeing this here?
Yes.
Mhm.
All right. So Matt, what do we got?
So that is the Investigator's Toolbox. That's the cover of PI Magazine, actually. So Investigator's Toolbox is an online resource community for investigative professionals. You don't have to be a licensed investigator, just do investigative type work. Certified fraud examiners, security people.
I have this issue on my desk.
Yeah, well, there you go. So that is available. So you can learn more at www.investigators-toolbox.com.
And do a quick plug for your podcast.
Okay, podcast is PI Perspectives. It's a weekly podcast where I interview people in the industry that do investigative work or service our industry, and I'm either teaching you how to do something or telling you who somebody is so you can call if you need to get that done. It's available on video, YouTube channel, or any podcast catcher. You can grab it as well.
All right. Okay, Caitlin.
Yes, so my business is Old Line Investigative Services. I'm based in Baltimore, Maryland area. And I've learned a lot from a lot of other investigators, and I actually subscribe to Matt Spaier's Investigators Toolbox platform, which is wonderful, and listen to his podcast religiously. And
Thank you.
And I'm going to be getting Scott's book now too.
Thank you.
Yes. So speaking of Scott's book.
So yeah, this is my book, Confessions of a Private Eye, my 30 years investigating cheaters, frauds, missing persons, and crooks. It took me about a year to write it, not every day, but about a year. And it pretty much highlights my 30 years, almost 30 years as a private investigator. And you'll see all the mistakes I've made along the way, things that I did that I shouldn't have done, and successes that I've had. And if you really want to know what it's like being a private investigator, it's very accurate, and you can find it on Amazon. It's available for Kindle and ebook as well as paperback, and the hardback is coming out soon as well.
All right, fantastic. All right, thanks, guys. So as for me, if you're up for a little Blade Runner style sci-fi with your crime and mystery, which I'm sure is right down your guys' day-to-day lives, I'll encourage you to check out my sci-fi noir Fractured Live, featuring my hard-boiled intergalactic private eye, Angela Hardwick, part Doctor Who, part Blade Runner, and part Philip Marlowe in Fractured Lives. Hardwick is hired to find out if a college freshman who is also a galaxy design savant is suffering from a nervous breakdown or is the victim of an urban legend known as the Scarlet Raj. Fractured Lives is available on Amazon and is published by Crazy 8 Press. And if you want a signed copy, you can order it from me directly. All right, that's our show for today. I want to thank our guests again, Matt, Caitlin, and Scott, for coming on to the show. And I want to thank everyone who's watching at home. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks a lot, guys, and take care.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys, for coming on the show. It was great. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye now.